Alright, so here we are on this beautiful day, June 17th, 2014 in Portland, Maine. We are now in the second third of this year-long commemoration of a year-long experiment that I did 10 years ago, where I sat down every day and wrote a daily meditation, which was a kind of a philosophical exercise, working with phrases and terms, specifically peace, freedom, the will, thinking, learning, meditating, principal terms brought together, cobbled together like notes and kind of musical composition. And really, if it was to sound like anything, I think that the writing would sound musically like Philip Glass's work. And I like Philip Glass. I never would have thought that that's how I would have written music, but this is really what this book sounds like, because there's a lot of repetition. So if you're familiar with the work of Philip Glass, then you would understand why, if you were to read my book, Being and Learning, which ultimately these meditations were published as Being and Learning, the book, you would understand what I mean when I say that it's repetitive. So on to the meditation, which is day 124, written today, 10 years ago, and so I'm commemorating it. It's pages 205 to 206 in Being and Learning. The sage is the initial bearer of the directive wisdom, the guide as messenger, the one who announces the arrival of the ineffable, the presence of the gap, which preserves freedom. The announcement occurs in the silence of painstaking listening, in the submission of the I to the thou. The ineffable makes its appearance with the renouncement of the claim to language, the silencing of the juridical voice, the one who judges, and the submission to painstaking listening. The ineffable, what's beyond language, makes its appearance with the arrival of the other, and thereby appears as the alterity that preserves the other, as stranger. With the appearance of the ineffable, the thou is born upon the I, and the self is enjoined dialogically. To entrust I to thou is to authentically receive the gift of teachability, of openness itself, and to become attuned to the not yet. The not yet appearing in the gap, the truth of concealment that shelters possibility, the freedom to be, the possibility becoming, that is always already preserved in the excess of presencing, the processual becoming, manifesting in the twofold play. Attunement to openness itself, to the appearance of the ineffable, of what is beyond language, is the essence of learning, as the, quote, action of the mind beyond all things that may be said. Quote from Lao Tzu. The most authentic praxis of being together. The sage is the initiator of this gathering and is the one most conditioned and best prepared for meditative thinking, for the reception of openness itself, most ready for the unforeseen. To be most ready for the unforeseen, for the arrival of the ineffable, what is beyond language, is to be prepared to follow the path of silence, to take up the arduous work of painstaking listening, to heed the gathering directive of wisdom. Heeding this gathering directive is to respond affirmatively to the beckoning of language, to face up to mortality, the limits of the singular ego, and to become devoted to learning as the pursuit of the beyond, which entails standing before the not yet. With this standing before the not yet, the learner takes the leap into the unforeseen and is gathered by the ineffable, what is beyond language, and sheltered by the freedom experience of being reposed, in being released by the letting go of the will and the letting be of the other, as other. With this leap into learning, this letting go, the self submits to the questioning stand, that responds to the evocative, that takes its leave with the mysterious not yet, and thereby gets underway with the shattering of the domestic safe house. The shattering of this domestic safe house of empty cognizing that operates under the oppressive logic of the calculative. The sage guides the learning that unfolds in the enchanted realm of the open region, where meaning-making, the creative performance issuing from poetic dialogue, is beyond the dictates of the propositional logic that always demands a definitive yes or no response. The aesthetic supplants the propositional logic in the performance of poetic dialogue, where the truth of being manifests and is known in the actuality of the freedom and peace that appear in the gathering of the many. This truth of being appears in the making of meaning, in the suffering of the pathos of poetic dialogue. This pathos is the nature, the essence, the being of experiential philosophy, which is the practice of meditative thinking that produces mindfulness. This production of mindfulness emerges in intersubjectivity, dialogue, where compassion is experienced with the appearance of the ineffable, with the submission of the self to the other, with the dialogic I-thou modality that is grounded in entrustment. To be joined intersubjectively is to be seized by the other. We call this being seized by the other the heeding of the directive of wisdom. This is the pathos of compassion. And the path of silence is where we suffer the pathos of compassion. And that's how it ended. This day, 10 years ago, June 17, 2004, read 10 years later, improvisationally. I did add a couple things here and there. It's something that I decided to do. This day, June 17th, 2014. Check out the blog, Being and Learning, Duarte Being and Learning on Blogger for some context and other thoughts related to this meditation.